come to play. He's the biggest of them all. Step back, 4-3. Phoenix forced a turnover at halfway. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Clock at 10. Adams the off balance. Oh my goodness. 2 on the clock.
Welcome to the Basketball Fixers Beyond the Buzzer. No, don't adjust your screens, don't adjust your volumes. You're not hearing things. Yes, this is Berto from the Tasmanian Takeover. The boys have asked me to come in to bring a little bit of class to the show. You know, when you've got to jump on here with Jeremy and Josh, I mean, it's not a hard standard to reach, but anyway. So welcome, boys. Good to have you here.
Thank you, mates. Yes, I'm looking forward to obviously jumping on with you today, mate. And it's nice because I'm sort of looking for a few co-hosts. My co-hosts, normally Jeremy and Ryan, are continually having holidays. We've seen Jeremy away for 2 weeks. And, buddy, I'm happy to have you back. But obviously Ryan is away for the week. But, yeah, looking forward to talking plenty of NBL action. It's been a pretty hectic last week and a half for the whole NBL world. And, yeah, it's good to welcome back Jeremy Dark. How are you, mate? You're muted, mate.
Maybe, sorry, boys. Maybe you
Showing
need to
a little ring rust there, mate. Ring rust.
That's right. A little ring rust. There's plenty of rust around my ring, mate.
brother.
He's back already.
I was just saying, Josh, maybe you're the problem. Maybe we're trying to get away from you and you're just not sort of realizing. But no, definitely good to be back. I got to jump on the Tasmanian Takeover for Berto while he was on holiday. So you're the only one that's due for a holiday, I think, mate. But I guess you're in Vegas not so long ago. But
well, I didn't know at the Basketball Fix we gave our annual leave, sick leave, and personal leave. I don't know what's going on here. I think we might have to readjust that as the bosses. But it's been a great week. But before we get into today's episode, boys, I just want to quickly give a massive shout out to all of these individual team podcasts. Like you mentioned there, Jez, obviously the Tassie Takeover, they're doing amazing things. The Wildcat Wrap, Hawks Hangout, Breakers Breakdown, the Bullets Broadcast, the Kings Table will be back very, very shortly. And I don't think I've missed anyone else there, but the 6-team podcast up and running right now, which is super, super exciting. And obviously you've got Beyond the Buzzer, you've got NBL Supercoach coming back very, very shortly. I've pretty much given up on that, to be honest with you, mate. The Supercoach world, it's all gone. And then obviously the one-on-ones as well. So plenty going on at the Basketball Fix, but I'll let it get back to the host, Berto. Get back stuck into it, mate.
And, of course, you can catch all the team podcasts and all the podcasts that Josh has talked about over at thebasketballfix.com. Make sure you do head over there for your basketball fix. It's fantastic. For fans, by fans. You're going to get the best insights there. End of story. And I'm not saying it just because I'm on it. I'm saying it because it's true. So if
a little bit.
Cut through, a little bit. Boys. Come on, we've got to have a little bit there. So the boys have put together a fantastic show. We're going to get into it, and we're at that crunch part of the season. You know, we're starting to see teams being locked in for the playoffs. We're starting to see the real battle begin. We're not even going to get. No, I don't really want to open a wound with the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers at the moment and how they're going. But let's talk, boys. What has been the biggest moments of the last round? Josh, do you want to kick us off and let us know what you think are the biggest moments?
Yeah, we've got a couple here, mate. And I think the biggest one which we'll start on is Melbourne United. Now, we sort of spoke about this just before Jeremy went away about a fortnight ago. And we're sort of talking about how this team is just dropping from, this title contender to basically back to the pack. Now, they go over the weekend, they go 2-0 with wins over the Wildcats and the Bullets. And both of those games were really, really impressive and slightly for different reasons. Now, the Wildcats game, looking at it from that perspective, for example, was a good playoff win, essentially. That game was fast and furious. It was heated. It was just plenty going on. And to win that game by 6 points, it was that little flurry at the start of the fourth quarter that really got them going as well. And watching them live, it's something that you just got to watch. Like, Jack White is just a star. 26 points, 16 rebounds against the Perth Wildcats, first and foremost. And he looks big on TV. But wait until he walks past you, boys. He has got shoulders like a truck. He is 6'10" and all of it. And he is just a massive human. And the thing, when you look at his statistics as well, when you break it down a bit further, something that's been missing from his games, that three-point shot. 2 of 5 against the Wildcats. But I'm being completely honest with you, it felt like he hit 5 of 5. It didn't really feel like he missed many shots in that particular game. But you look to obviously to the Brisbane Bullets game as well, a massive blowout win. Now, this is what this team needs now as well. They've got to have that confidence because these players have had up and down little runs. You've seen Ian Clark, same thing. He's had a pretty quiet last month for Melbourne United. he had 16 points in the game against the Perth Wildcats, and then comes back out and has 24 points against the Brisbane Bullets. And we know what he can produce at the top level. We've seen him win an NBA championship, and we've already seen him win an NBL championship as well with the Sydney Kings. He's a guy who will come on, give you that 15 to 20 points per game, take the pressure off a Chris Goulding, a Shea Ely, a Matthew Dellavedova. He defends hard. He's a really, really solid leader. So I'm really excited for this team, to be honest with you, going into the finals. I think now they're a massive chance. They're currently sitting second, and they're a huge chance of locking in top 2 position right now. When we sort of speaking about a few weeks ago, we thought, it's probably going to be one of, 2 of the Hawks, the Wildcats, and the Kings that were going to finish in the top 2. Well, Melbourne United have had a massive weekend and pretty much turned the whole standings on their head. So I'm looking forward to obviously hearing what Jez has to say. But one more thing before I hand it over to him. One thing that has been a bit of a question for mine is their depth. I don't think they've got the most solid depth when we are talking about NBL basketball, but a really positive thing from the weekend. 32 points from the bench in the game against the Perth Wildcats and 50 points off the bench in the game against the Bullets as well. So if I'm Dean Vickerman and I'm that full coaching staff with Jacob Chance and all those boys there, I would be really pleased by that from a full team perspective. But they're absolutely rolling right now, and they deserve their little bit of credit here for sure.
Yeah. Jez, what do you reckon? What's bringing it?
Yeah, for me, it's pretty much the guys that Josh pointed out. You see Jack White. It wasn't just the game against the Perth Wildcats where he stood up. Melbourne got a big win against Sydney as well. And in that game, Jack White also had 23 and 10. So you look at the moments where he's got to perform. He had a blinder at the start of the season. He was on fire. We were talking MVP for Jack White. And then it sort of went a little bit quiet there in the middle of the season, but now he's starting to step up and more importantly in those big games. And that's what he has to do, because we all know the threat of Chris Goulding from the perimeter. And then you've got to have Jack White that can also drive to the basket. And like Josh said, popping up threes, because early in the season, he did it as well. He was pretty clutch from the 3-point line in a couple of games and got some really crucial wins for Melbourne earlier in the season by actually hitting 3-pointers, which isn't sort of what you generally relate to Jack White. And I think also the important thing for them is, Ian Clark and Shea Ely. They need this secondary scoring. And we've seen that over the last 5 games where Melbourne have actually gone 4-1. Like Josh mentioned, Ian Clark the last 2 games, but before that, it was Shea Ely scored 20, 15, and 20 in the 3 games before that. There was one loss in the mix there, but still, they need that secondary scoring. They need to have that other threat. You've got Goulding, and then you've got Ian Clark and Ely on the perimeter, and of course, you've got Delhi that's dishing the ball out and being the postman and delivering scoring opportunities to the guy that's in space. So that's when Melbourne play their best. And we were worried about Melbourne a month ago. They were right in the guts of this 7-game away streak. Last year, they went 3-4 when they had to play away from John Cain while the Australian Open was on. They went 5-2 this year. So I think that's the difference. That's why all of a sudden we've got this. It's almost a change of heart, because we were ruling them out not so long ago, and now we're all right. They're definitely championship contenders because they won on the road. I think they've actually had more problems even winning at John Cain a little bit this season. They've had a couple of shock losses at home. They've found it tough to win against Southeast Melbourne. I think they're 0-2 in the throwdown with one more left to finish the season. And that could be the game changer for them. That could lock them into a top 2 spot, give their older roster a little bit of a chance to rest coming into the finals, because there's quite a big break there. I believe it's like 10 to 14 days or something you get if you finish in the top 2. So that's something that could be extremely vital for Melbourne United as we look to the run into the playoffs, because if they can lock that in, give their bodies a bit of a rest, have some time to recuperate. You see a lot of teams that are struggling with small little niggling injuries at the moment. A lot of the contenders, some people are going down. You get that rest, you're on top heading into the finals. And all of a sudden, we're talking about this roster of Melbourne that we were a little bit uncertain of all season being in prime position to, make it to another final and possibly win a championship.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're bang on there, mate. And one player that you mentioned there briefly was just Chris Goulding, and I want to just highlight him in particularly the game against the Perth Wildcats. Now, he went 2 of 12 from the 3-point line. And it wasn't like the Wildcats were defending him great. Like, he had probably 5 wide open 3-point shots that he missed. And like, I spoke to Vickerman after the game in that press conference and asked him about it. I said, you know, how important was this win with Goulding going 2 of 12 from deep and having a pretty poor shooting night? And he goes, well, it's just the next man up mentality that we do have. But it would be nice if we get this next man mentality up with Chris Goulding obviously going. So if you put that into perspective, I know obviously they won the game. Looking at a bit glass half full, they probably should have won this game by 10 plus points in the end because they were the better team, I think, that second half in that particular game. So a really, really good performance. And I think Vickerman's very, very stoked. And it's never fun seeing Melbourne United up top of the ladder as a Perth Wildcats supporter, mate.
You think Goulding would have been dropping threes after he was sitting and watching Bryce Cotton highlights before the game. So it might have put him off a little bit. Who knows?
Definitely.
Yes, as much as it's great that they found their form again, yeah, I'm not a big fan when I see United at the top of the ladder there. But another team that has been quite surprising in their sudden return to form or finding form, however you want to look at it, is Adelaide. Boys, what's going on? Have they managed to find something that's going to help them get into the 6? Much to my dismay, are they going to take the 6th spot? Josh?
I think they're going to take the 6th spot, to be honest with you, mate. Like, I look at them and I look at where they're sort of building right now. I just think the way Tassie's got their injury problems, the Bullets are starting to fall back with their injury problems. They've now got Tyrell Harrison and Josh Bannon in these concussion protocol things. And I reckon it's purely just because they can get another injury replacement player out of Josh Bannon now. Because, you know, all of a sudden he had a knee complaint and now that knee complaint's turned into a concussion. 2 different parts of the body when we're looking at it there. But they're probably, I think, definitely out now. And I think Tassie have still got a massive chance. They've got a decent run home. But I'm not sure if they can turn it on these last 3 games to sort of secure themselves a spot. But when we are looking at Adelaide, which is the big thing, and we'll have a bit of a chat about them later on because there's a bit of a segment that we're going to talk about their bench in particular. But we've got to look at their 2 starters, and there's probably not a better combination in the NBL than Kendrick Davis and Montrezl Harrell. So, you know, when you're looking at sort of that particular game against the Sydney Kings, for example, they weathered the storm from Jalen Adams, who had 43 points and 7 assists. You know, and Kendrick of his own game, you know, he had 23 points Kendrick had 23 points and 13 assists in a couple of games later, but they've been incredible, like, to say the least, with these 2 guys. That combination that they work, Kendrick is really, really happy to start the game shooting the basketball. He races to 10 points very quickly, and then it seems like in quarters 2 and 3, he gets everyone else involved, and then he knows he's the closer of this particular team. And the way he gets Montrezl Harrell involved, the way he gets Isaac Humphries involved, you know, even guys like Lat Mayen, Dejan Vasiljevic, Sunday Dech had 16 points in one of those games over the weekend. This team, whilst they're very, very top-heavy, if I'm a team who wanted to be top-heavy, I'd be very happy having Kendrick Davis and Montrezl Harrell at the helm because they are absolutely dominating. And the conversation is really starting to come and really starting to heat up a little bit with that MVP conversation. I know we're not going to talk about that today. That's a story for another day. But that is genuinely heating up. Like, Bryce has been pretty good. He saw what Kendrick's been up to. He had 38 on that Cairns Taipans game. But, mate, Kendrick Davis is an absolute star. Like I mentioned, there 23 points and 13 assists. But I think they're going to finish 6th. Like, I think that game against the Perth Wildcats is going to be a very interesting one. Because if they win that, they might pull Perth back down to 5th. As Perth obviously have South East Melbourne Phoenix, the Sydney Kings, and the Adelaide 36ers to finish the year. So realistically, they still could fight for a top 2 spot. I don't see them happening at all, to be honest with you. But Adelaide might come over to RAC Arena, where they do love playing. It's one of the oldest rivalries in the NBL, and may knock them off for the 6th spot in the NBL finals.
Mm-hmm. Jez, what do you reckon? I mean, I really do believe we have 2 teams that are falling behind due to injury, being Tassie and the Bullets. What are your thoughts, and do you think Adelaide slip into that 6th spot?
Yeah, like the Adelaide slip in because Brisbane and Tassie are sinking ships. I think it's more that for me than they're deserving to be in the top 6 and play finals purely because of the star power of Kendrick Davis and Montrezl Harrell. And also you throw in there DJ and Isaac Humphries. That starting 5 is all class, and it is hard to beat. But yeah, like we said, we're going to dive into the depth of their team, but it's when you've got guys playing that many minutes, it's going to be really, really tough down the stretch. So for me, I would have liked to obviously see Tassie in there, being a Tassie man myself, and even Brisbane. It felt like they were deserving there before they started to succumb to all of their injury problems as well. And it would have been nice to see them sort of get a bit of revenge for what happened last year, missing out on the last day of the season. So, yeah, I see that they're definitely going to make the sixth, but I think it's more down to the other teams that were competing that are sort of falling off. But for them as well, they've still got 3 games left. They play the Bullets, which I think this is their must-win game, because they do play Southeast Melbourne, who I rate extremely high as still, even though they had a loss not so long ago, they're still a dark horse for me for the championship if they can get things rolling like they were sort of a couple of weeks ago. And then they play the Wildcats. So on this card, they've got more likely than not, they're going to go into their 2 final games as the underdog, and they go in against Brisbane now as the favourite. And if these are the type of games that you can lose, you go in a little bit underdone. You've seen with Illawarra the last sort of few weeks, they've lost to Cairns, twice in 20 days. These sorts of things can happen. So if they lose this one, the race is wide open again, because you just never know. The Bullets play Cairns. They could get a win all of a sudden. They're on the same amount of points, I believe, because they'll have 2 wins. So they jump up to 2 wins, and then it's a game of percentage. And if Tassie can snag a win, you just sort of never know. They're like, it is wide open. I love it. I love that it's coming down to the last 2 rounds of the season, and we don't know who's going to finish first, and we don't know who's going to finish sixth. It's the NBL in a nutshell right there, and that's why we love it, and that's why we're so passionate about this league, because it's wide open with the amount of games, and it goes down to the wire. It did last year as well. So I think Adelaide should seal it, but I don't know. We'll see. It's still wide open.
You're absolutely right. And I think it's one of the things that, as much as I'd like to see more teams in the league, being that it is only 10 teams, this is what happens. You start to get into this last part of the season where really you fart and it changes. And it's unbelievable. It's exciting. It keeps you on edge. Speaking of exciting, we've got a team sitting at the bottom of the ladder, just sitting there throwing haymakers at the moment. They've got nothing to lose. Jez, what's going on with the Taipans, man? How is it they've suddenly found their form when it's pretty much too late?
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? And without Taron Armstrong, I think it's just been it's incredible. It shows that 40 up there is doing something right. He's keeping his team motivated. It would be easy for them, pack their bags, be already on the boat to Bali, ready for their summer holidays and going on a bit of a summer bender. But they're here to fuck shit up, like, excuse the French, but that's exactly what they're doing, because they're causing big problems at the top of the table. You're like, okay, first it was like, all right, Illawarra sweet, they're going to break ahead, and then they go down, and then same with Perth. It's like they're gonna cement their spot in the top 2, and they're going to be in the mix, and then all of a sudden they're done. You know, they're a danger. They're an absolute danger, and now they're going to start to play a role, like we said, in the back end with Brisbane, and they're playing Brisbane and they're playing Tasmania in games that they should win when they're fighting to get into the top 6, and they can mess things up there as well. So they're an absolute danger. And, you know, to be honest, there's probably 3 guys in the lineup for me that are making a massive difference. And we'll go through their attributes right now. But I think the biggest guy for me here is Sam Waardenburg. He's just been off the chain. He's had 2 games with doubles. He's been incredible for them all season. He's really, really changing the game. And then him locking in with Tanner Groves down low, they've been extremely hard to beat in the paint all of a sudden. So they're forcing teams to shoot on them. So I think definitely that, these 2 guys have just been incredible. Illawarra scored under their average in the paint when they played against them. And then they outscored Perth in the paint 50-28. So that's a massive stat. So it really shows their stature. And so Waardenburg's been doing the scoring, getting rebounds. And Tanner Groves, you saw him. He was like their key defender against Perth. He was everywhere. You saw in the clutch times, he broke both his ankles on Bryce Cotton when he got that 3 in the first overtime just before he missed the free throw. But he absolutely got busted by Bryce. But the thing is, his 40's giving him that opportunity to mark guys like Bryce. And then he was down low and copped a massive gash, standing up and trying to get a charge call on Pinder coming over the top. Or they were chasing down rebounds. But he's in the trenches. He's at the top. He's been everywhere. So I think it's those effort plays. And that's what 40 has really sort of pounded into these guys, and that's why they're winning, because everybody thinks they're a walkover, but they're there to play, they're there to steal wins, and they're there to mess stuff up. But Josh, who else do you think on the Taipans team has been like, how have they lifted and how have they done it without Taron Armstrong?
Oh, mate, it's clearly the most disrespectful thing I think this team can do. Like, when you look at it, they're just knocking off these contenders. They're ruining teams' chance at high playoff runs and all that sort of stuff. But when you look at this team from top to bottom, I think the most improved player and the most important player for this particular team is Sam Waardenburg. Like, you look at him from last year compared to this year, and he's been a guy who, at stages this year, has flirted with a triple-double. Now, I don't want to throw a direct comparison to a guy like Xavier Cooks because he's a much better scorer, but there is similar attributes in the way that they play make as big men. They're really, really quick. They've got good hands. They've got good dribbling skills. They've got good abilities, and they've just got a good feel and good touch about it all as well. So I really like him as a player. I think he's going to be a guy. But the one thing I think that we've all got to remember with this Cairns Taipans team, and we spoke about this last week with Felix Van Hoff, they've got 8 players going into this season without a contract. Now, what that does to an individual player's psyche is tremendous. You are playing essentially for your professional basketball career, because a lot of these guys might not want to go and play Europe. They want to sit at home. They want to be in their home environment, their home country, everything like that. And that's really important to some of these guys. So when you look at the guys who are up for grabs in terms of, Sam Waardenburg, and when you've got AK Gak, and then you've got all 3 imports in Bradshaw, Edwards, and obviously Groves as well, up for contract renewal as well, that's their best, some of their best 4 to 5 players essentially for the whole team. And then obviously you've got the questions around Taron Armstrong. Is he going to go to the NBA? Is he not? It's going to be really interesting, because I just think this team is really, really good from start to finish. Like, I think they've got some good depth, and it's really young depth, and that's what we know. But 40 just always seems to find a way. When his back's against the wall, everyone was calling for his job a few weeks ago to get a couple of wins. He's notoriously done this his whole entire career. And I think the thing for him is he sort of had to have, whilst he's had pressure, as stupid as it sounds, whilst there's been pressure externally, there's been no pressure internally. You can't make the finals. It's not like you're fighting for a top 6 spot. Go out there and play, have fun, and let's see if we can get these guys back together and do it next year. So I think he's coaching freely. We saw it against the Wildcats. They just had fun. Edwards, another 30-point game. He was loving it. Shooting threes, driving down. Groves, loving it. Even though he's busted open, he's bleeding from everywhere, loving it. Sam Waardenburg, 20-odd points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, loving his basketball. This is what 40 wants to see. He can't give you the most amount of money compared to a Perth, a Sydney, and Melbourne, but he can let you have fun, and he can let you flourish as a star player as well. So I think it's great, because we don't want to hear the words liquidation, leaving the league, all this sort of things coming up with these particular teams, because it'd be a massive hole. And 40 spoke about this in the press conference. It's a community-owned team. Yep. I know the community doesn't have to make many decisions, and they don't get much chance to make many decisions, but they are proud of the fact that they're a community-owned team. So, yeah, really, really impressive. Hopefully they can have a few more wins to end the season. Hopefully they can kill a couple of other teams' playoff chances as well.
Absolutely. And I think with 40, it's one thing I really do like about him is the fact that I think he knows he's not going to have a championship winning team, but by Christ, is he going to get the absolute best out of you? Jez, sorry, I cut you off a moment ago. What were you going to say, mate?
No, but it is just about that as well. Like, if you think how they're playing now at the back end of the season, and to what they got 3 wins in since the 2nd of January or something when they beat Illawarra, compared to that sort of long stretch, it feels like they've played better when they've had nothing to lose. And how do you think, I don't know, either Josh or Berto, like how do you think that they can instill this type of attitude at the start of the season? There's always pressure that you obviously want to make the finals, but when you look at sort of the roster, the cash, compared to some of the other teams, it feels like you're just like, okay, we're just going to play, we're going to have fun. Like that was the biggest thing I took out of watching the overtime. The 2 coaches from Perth and Cairns, obviously a lot more on the line, but you could see 40 jumping up, high five, and getting under. Even when Rob Edwards missed his 2 free throws, he was straight in. He sort of laughed about the whole situation, where you saw John really sort of sitting down, with his arm up on on the media table, like full on in stress. Obviously, way more to lose. That loss was much harder for them than it would have been for Cairns. But it's sort of giving this sort of relaxed attitude. Forty's gotten the most out of his players. And it feels like that's sort of what you need to do up in Cairns, because there's the hope of making the finals, but maybe the expectation doesn't have to be there every year to make the finals, because they are sort of this underdone team. Or am I sort of a little bit off there?
Yeah, look, for me, and maybe wrongly so, but I've always seen Cairns as almost like a development pathway. They're not the NBL 1, but they're the sort of club that you know that, okay, if you were to make it to the finals, even to the championship, yeah, it would be a bit of a fluke. But then you start to see some of the players that get into 40's program, learn his way, get some great minutes, have some great games, and then they get picked up by other clubs with a little more money and a little bit more to lose. And then, I think it's almost a great thing to have, to be almost like the unofficial development pathway, because they're more competitive than, say, an NBL 1 club, but they know that they're not going to potentially make it into the finals each year. So what do you got to lose? Just go out there and put the balls on the line.
Yeah.
Josh, you got something to add there before we wrap up?
Yeah, it's tough, mate. But I think the biggest thing that when we think about this team from last year to this year, the biggest metric that we've got to look at when we are talking about early season success is the fact that they had 3 new imports. And they also had, a pretty relatively young team as well. So you've got inexperience as well as no coercion as well. That's a massive step back compared to some of these other teams who have, Wildcats, for example, they brought back Doolittle. They've obviously got Cotton. The Jack Jumpers, for example, had Milton Doyle and brought back Jordan Crawford as well. You're bringing back key pieces to the puzzle. And I think this is where 40's using his last back end of the season to try and get a Rob Edwards to stick around and hope he's having fun, to try and get a Tanner Groves to have fun. And you can see him, instead of trying to get stuck into him, and as you spoke about, he's coddling them. He's getting around them. You're great. It's fine. It's all good. Because they know they haven't got enough money. They haven't got enough experience. And they don't have any championships. So they need to have these guys around. So, yeah, it's a tough one for Cairns, and it always has been. But hopefully they can have some success in the near future.
I like the way you're thinking with that one. I really do. All right, before we head into a break, we're going to do a little Guess Who. So, Josh, what are the hints for this week's Guess Who?
I just want to jump in here. I don't like you talking trash about me to Felix and saying how bad I am. I had that one nailed with Owen Foxwell. I was in my car driving home from the airport, and I was like, I got this one. I almost wanted to ring in, but I was listening to it a day after. I was ready to go.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah.
That's
I got this one. Yeah, we'll see if I can get this one. I've been on fire.
All right, we're going to hand it over to Berto first, mate. And if Berto doesn't get it, then you can jump on underneath him as well. But I'll give you the hints first anyways.
Love jumping underneath Berto.
Alrighty, so the hints are: I'm averaging over 14 points per game this season. I am from New Zealand. I'm a forward in the NBL, and I wear the number 21. All right, we're going to go to a very short little break here. Once we come back, I'll redo the questions for the boys and everyone listening at home, and then we'll get the first initial thoughts and hopefully get the boys' answers as well. Alrighty, so welcome back to Beyond the Buzzer. Now we are doing Guess Who, as we always do. Jeremy's favourite segment, as you heard before. He's a little bit of a, he's got a bit of a sookiness about to him today about the Guess Who. So we'll give him a chance to somewhat, hopefully, redeem himself. I'm not sure if Berto has had a quick read of this before or had a bit of research. So we'll get his initial thoughts first before Jez thinks he's nailed it. So I'm averaging 14 points per game this season, over 14 points per game this season. I'm from New Zealand. I am a forward in the NBL, and I wear the number 21. Clint, Berto, Burtonshaw, what are your first initial thoughts, mate? And
mate, I'm going to be honest, my initial thoughts was open up the NBL app and see if I could quickly find the number jersey. So I'm not even going to try, Jez. You can take the thunder on this one because I'm just going to bullshit me way through.
This one connects with me on so many levels. One, they're a little bit like me in this segment. They've been absolutely rubbish all year, and then all of a sudden just powering home because they've got nothing to lose. So the guy we just talked about, it is definitely our boy Sam Waardenburg from the Cairns Taipans.
It is Sam Waardenburg. And I think one thing as well, mate, is a lot of people don't know he's actually a Kiwi-born player. So when we're touching on boys, for example, who may potentially go
Careful
back
what
home,
you say there, mate.
yeah, who may go home, for example, he may go home and follow Sam Menenga as well. But Jez, well done, mate. I'll have to message Felix and say he's not too bad. He's gone 3 of 17 on the year now, we'll say.
No, but I'm 3 from 3 the last. You're only as good as your last guess who, mate.
That's it.
What do you got? 3 for 17? Starting to sound like my free throw average just quietly, but anyway.
Bryce Cotton's even, you could say. Got to get in that stab.
All right, let's move into most improved player in the NBL. And look, I really enjoy this this part of the show because I think it's really nice to hear outside of the typical NBL media who you guys think. And I really enjoy hearing the fact that you guys actually do a whole lot of sort of analysis and whatnot. So I'm going to throw to you first, Josh, because I can already see on the run sheet you got more stats on here than a friggin' analytics spreadsheet. So who do you think is the most improved player?
Yeah, well, before we get into sort of who my guy is, I just want to give a couple of notable mentions. So,
you love a shout out, Josh.
I do love a shout out. Come on, this is the only way we get these boys on their one-on-one interviews, all right? So, we'll give the first one to Taron Armstrong. I think he's had an incredibly underrated season this year. I think if it wasn't for the slight little back end of season mishaps and injuries and that sort of stuff, I think he'd be up there a little bit higher. I think there's going to be some sort of sympathy votes there as they try to push him up to win an award to go to the next level in the NBA. But I think he still deserves a shout out. And the other guy as well is Kawat Noi. I think he's gone from a genuine sort of role player to the, star off the bench or the star role player. I don't know. There's a slight little jump there. I spoke about this years ago when Keanu Pinder won the award in back-to-back years. And I spoke about how he went from a role player to a starter. Then he went from a starter to a superstar. And that's why he won that award 2 times in a row. But I just wanted to give a quick little shout to him because he's been incredible. But the guy I've chosen is another guy who, statistically wise, hasn't jumped off the scale. I don't think he's a guy, and I think most people would agree when I say that he hasn't jumped off the scale, but he is averaging a better points per game margin than he ever has in his career. Same with the rebounds, same with the assists, same with the blocks. He's also shooting the best field goal percentage he has in his whole entire career as well. And the most important thing is the fact that his plus minus has gone from a plus 2.3 as his best ever career sort of average there to a plus 9.1. Now, I'm talking of Illawarra Hawks backup guard, Will Hickey. Now, I just think this guy has just gone leaps and bounds. Now, there's a few reasons I really want to dive into him. So, again, that magical number, PP40, which I've spoken about a few times on the Basketball Fix, that offensive rating, essentially. Where do you guys think that Will Hickey, Mr. averaging 8.8 points per game, is sitting in PP40 rankings?
I'm all over this because I was also looking deep into Will Hickey for our next segment. So he's second
Number
in PP40. Is he?
Number 1 in the NBL. So for points per 40 minutes that your team scores, I'm pretty sure. Oh, no, he's second behind Jesse Wagstaff.
Oh, no, Rayman has missed out.
I missed it. But 109.4 points per game that the Illawarra Hawks score when he is on. I had that on MP40. He's actually in the top 20 in MP40 as well. So defensive rating as well, which is relatively good as well. But when we look at this guy from an importance perspective, and it's a bit hard because he sort of segues a little bit into the next segment. I don't want to go too much into him. But his importance for this team is second to none. I still think he's the most important role player for them. And anytime one of Trey Kell, Tyler Harvey, even a Darius Days go down, his minutes increase and so does his role. And he just seamlessly does it. And we saw him in the playoffs last year for the Illawarra Hawks. Yeah. Most people had no idea who this guy was, like at the back end of last season. He's then a guy who most people locked into their NBL Supercoach team at the start of this year, who most people have had a close eye on. And some people, me included, had him in the top 15 players in the NBL at a certain point this season as well, and he was absolutely flying. So I'm going to go with the most improved player unofficially at the Basketball Fix right now as Will Hickey. But Jez, you've got a little one close to Ryan's heart. Now I talk about Ryan's heart because I'm talking about his hair in particular. You've gone with a bit of a ginger, mate. You've gone with one of the gingers.
Yeah, before I jump on a ginger, that sounds a bit rough as well. I just want to say, Will Hickey absolutely. He even made his Boomers debut this year. when they had their games over in Asia. So, yeah, he's been a phenomenon. He's a very, very, very big reason why Illawarra is sitting at the top of the ladder, because he changes the game. He, like you said, it's the transition of him in and out is so seamless. When if it's covering an injury or just coming off the bench to give one of their starters a breather, it makes no difference. He's improving when it comes statistically. He's improving. If Tyler Harvey or Trey Kell go off, he's actually improving the scoring than what if one of those guys was on in certain aspects of breaking down statistics. So, yeah, incredible. But enough about Will Hickey. I'm jumping on the ginger that we've been talking about already earlier, and that's Sam Waardenburg. So, for me, he's been incredible for Cairns. I'm just trying to slide down on my run sheet, and for some reason I can't pull up his stats, but he's improved for them so much compared to the seasons that he has had there. He started his career in Cairns pretty strong. He averaged 11.3 points. He was shooting at 53% from the field and playing only sort of 26 minutes. But last year he had a little bit of a dip. His numbers went down, averaging 9.7 points per game. He was shooting at only 43% last year. But then all of a sudden this season, he's been that key man. You could arguably say that he's been the most important guy for the Cairns Taipans, but you obviously got to compare to Taran Armstrong and even Rob Edwards. But when Waardenburg was out, they really, really struggled. You saw they just started. They got dominated more than they have all season when he was out with his injury there for a few weeks. So all of a sudden this season he's averaging 14.2 points. So that's like almost 3 points more than his NBL career. And he's also got averaging 1 block. The really, really important stat for me is also averaging 3.4 assists. So that's exactly what you want from a guy that plays like Sam Waardenburg. It's what we sort of see with these versatile big guys that can drive to the basket and play the hard game, but then they can also shoot. And then when they're actually getting heavily marked and teams are starting to double team, they can dish it off over, under, and setting up screens and being there for the pick and roll. So the versatility of him has been amazing. And then, like what we mentioned a little bit earlier, it's also his defense. He's been a brick wall. He's been able to pick up their opposition key shooters and play whatever role that needs to be if he's moving in from the 4 to the 5 or even sort of covering there at the 3. So I think the versatility of him is amazing. You really hope for Cairns' sake that he stays. Like you want this core, like we mentioned, you want them to be able to hold this core together, keep Sam there, keep Rob Edwards, even Pedro Brayshaw, whoever they can hold there. You just want to see them start to build a little bit. And then if Taran Armstrong goes over to the US next year, or if he stays another year, Cairns could be that little bit of a force. It could be that peak that we see in them with their curve of winning and being competitive and pushing into the finals, and then they have this dip because everybody exits. So hopefully with this core and basing their offense and defense around Sam Waardenburg and Taran Armstrong, we could see Cairns be competitive next year instead of sitting out. So definitely for me, the Ranger, Sam Waardenburg, the Kiwi, 2 things that we love to hate.
Sweet. And look, I'm going to have to say, but Josh's notable mention is certainly someone I would say is a most improved player. Kuat Noi. I had the absolute privilege now of watching him play live at Kudos Arena, and it's a vibe. When he walks on that court, there is a vibe there. And when that ball's in his hand, it's money. It's money. Through the hoop. It doesn't matter where he is. I don't think he's human. I think there might be a cybernetic skull under his face. It's just done. I cannot say I've seen someone go from, almost unknown, unless of course you were that team's, fan, to now he's definitely in the running. If he doesn't get it, there's something wrong. 6-man. Has to pull the 6-man. Followed probably very closely by my man Majuk Deng, but we'll leave that for a Tasmanian Takeover podcast. Jez, you got one last quick comment before we move on?
Yeah, just about Cotton. You almost get a little bit when he's hot. You get these like Montrezl Harrell type vibes in the way that he can really get the arena going. You know, he loves to sort of get the crowd on his back and really sort of turn the whole arena around. When he's hot, he's up and he's in there, and he's so charismatic. And I remember listening to the interview that Josh did with him earlier in the year. He's such a humble, sort of quietly confident guy, but you put him on the court and he turns into this absolute beast. And I think that's the charm about Quatnoy. He's just an absolute gun, and then he can just really sort of get fire, and then all of a sudden you see this absolute Montrezl Harrell like beast on the court, and then he's just so humble off the court. So I think that, like love everything that he's doing there. And it hurt when he just absolutely destroyed the Jack Jumpers a couple of weeks ago.
And I tell you what, the expression on your face leading into that, I was a bit worried that you were getting a bit hot for Kawhi. But anyway, all right, moving right along. And speaking about people coming off the bench, let's talk bench. Let's talk how can a team's bench shape the season and their championship hopes. And I think this
great
is really
segue, Berto.
Oh, mate, this is why I'm in radio.
That's why we love you. That's why we love you, man.
But in all honesty, I think we're really starting to see it at this end of the coming to the end of the regular season, where people are hurt, people are potentially sick, and now the coaches are looking down the line going, well, what have I got? Jez, you want to kick us off for this one? What do you reckon? How does it help with championship hopes?
Yeah, well, I think you're bang on the money right there. We're seeing now the pinch of teams that don't have the depth in their bench, that are really sort of starting to struggle. Say maybe not to take sides, but yeah, besides the Jack Jumpers, they've got 3 players out. So you can understand sort of why they're struggling, because their bench has actually been very strong especially since Roth decided to move Jordan Crawford there and sort of play that impact role that he's done this season. Sort of that turned the whole of the Jack Jumper season on its head when Shawnee Mack come in and started, and then you had Jordan Crawford just sort of powering a little bit like what Will Hickey does for Illawarra. But you certainly, when we're looking at teams of who's going to go long, I think what we do is sort of put these teams that have the deepest bench. They're at the top of the ladder at the moment in rankings of who's actually going to win the championship. And I think we all agree that definitely the Illawarra Hawks are there, and it's got a lot to do with Will Hickey. But it's not just Will Hickey; it's that whole second unit, especially when you're talking about Hyung Lee and also Lockie Albridge. These 3 guys, it's like topping the ranks when it comes to this magic stat that Josh has been on about the last sort of couple of months in PP40. They actually, Will Hickey's second in points per 40 minutes, but then you've got Lee and Albridge in 3rd and 4th. So you can really see the impact that these guys are having on the whole game of the Illawarra Hawks, and what that does by having a strong unit. When we're looking at the long haul, you're seeing Illawarra be able to manage, besides the injury to Darius Days, you're not seeing, say, Tyler Harvey and Trey Kell and even Sam Froling all playing over, too many minutes. They're barely scratching 30 minutes because they've got this strong second unit in. And that's really, really important down at the end of the road when we come into finals, and especially when you come into 3-game series and 5-game series, because you need these second units to be able to not only have an impact on the score sheet, but also be able to control what the opposition is doing. And for me, that's almost the most important thing. I think we can talk about them scoring points, but for me, it's finding that balance, and they're able to take on defensively the starting 5 of an opposition team with confidence. So you can give your starters a rest, because no matter what, who's coming in and out of the sub box on the opposition, you guys are going to at least be able to defend. And I think that's the most important thing. So we see teams like Illawarra, and then you also have to say, obviously, Sydney. We give Sydney a lot of flack about, not getting their lineup right, but they're able to bring in guys and still be able to defend. And that's why they're the best defensive team in the competition, because they have that depth on the defensive side of the ball, which makes them which makes them a danger, because then they keep teams close, and like we said, then they win in the fourth quarter because they've been the best fourth quarter team in the competition. But it's because their bench can also do the job. So yeah, bench is key. It's almost like arguably the most important thing in the competition, especially when you're moving into the playoffs.
Josh, what do you reckon?
Yeah, well, it's a tough one, mate, because you spoke about the Kings there briefly, and I think you bang on with the Yellow Hawk stuff, and I'm not going to go into any much more detail on that, because I think they've probably got the most all-around consistent bench in the NBL. Now, obviously, the Kings lead the way with bench points per game, with 36.1 bench points at the moment. Now, I find this stat with this, especially with the Sydney Kings, they're the outlier, because Brian Gorsden's still got no idea what to do with this particular team. So one week, Jalen Adams is bloody coming off the bench scoring 30 points, and this is why this average is so high. And then you've got Cam Oliver who'll have 22 points, and then you'll have Alex Tui coming off the bench, he'll have 20-odd points. You've got Kawatnoy consistently throwing up over the last 8 weeks, 20-plus points as well. They're a bit of the outlier, because it's not like it's set in stone. This is where I wanted to have this discussion, for example, because whilst the averages of these particular teams are really, really good, it doesn't paint the whole story. And it's similar with the Jack Jump as well, 34.7 points per game. Nearly 20 of those are coming from Jordan Crawford. So then your next 3 players or 4 players are really only scoring 15 when you look at it from that perspective there. So where I really want to jump into is the Perth Wildcats, the South East Melbourne Phoenix, and then the Adelaide 36ers. Now, the Perth Wildcats currently fourth with 33.7 points per game coming off the bench. Now, in the last couple of weeks, that has jumped up 1.5 points per game. And that's purely based on the fact that Doolittle's come off the bench in 2 of those past 3 games for the Wildcats. He's had 23 points and then 33 points. But when you look at their overall split on their bench, it's really, really consistent. So you've got Pinder coming off the bench. You've got Pepper coming off the bench. You've got Wagstaff coming, Hiram Harris as well. These guys are starting to come off the bench as well. And they're scoring between that 5 to 10 points per game. And they're sort of chopping and changing. And that's where I sort of look at, a really consistent sort of lineup. And you're seeing the starters, obviously, with Bryce having his 35 points and, Itano Munster having his moments, Benny Henschel having his moments. This is where you're starting to see a bit of a bench unit, a complement the Perth Wildcats. And this is why they're averaging 99.5 points per game, and 34 of them essentially are coming from the bench. Now, the South East Melbourne Phoenix, they're a team who is very reliant, I think, on their star players. And this does really paint the picture for that in a certain degree. You've got Matt Hurt, you've got Jordan Hunter, and obviously you've got Nathan Sobey, who's been an absolute superstar for this team. Now, 27 bench points per game. This is where I get a little bit worried. Now, I think there's a little bit of a question mark about them, because all it takes is one injury to a Matt Hurt and Nathan Sobey, and they've already got Derek Walton Jr. out for the rest of the regular season. And I don't think they've got the bench and the depth to carry them up. They've got Angus Glover, I get that. They've got Owen Foxwell, I 100% understand that. But there is a slight drop-off. Joe Wieskamp has had a pretty good back end of the season. But besides those 3 players, there's not much else. You go on to Vodanovic, you go on to a few of these other guys as well who probably aren't up to the standard, when you're looking compared to a Perth Wildcats, a Melbourne United, a Sydney Kings, and Illawarra Hawks. So it's really interesting. But, Jez, you've got some pushback on Adelaide. And I think we're going to be on the somewhat of the same boat here. But have a bit of a chat away, mate. Go ahead.
Pushback before we move over to Adelaide, really. It's you. I feel that your focus on this is all about points production. But for me, I think where Sydney is like holding their own on the bench, no matter who they're coming, whoever's on the bench, whoever is starting, they can play. Their defensive unit holds strong, and I think that's just as important. It's not all about how many bench points can we score. It's about how well your bench players defend when they're on the court. And the versatility with Sydney having all of these guns is that they can actually swap and change, and they're still able to stay in games, win games, still be at the pointy end of the ladder, because everyone can defend. Everybody knows. I think even Kelly Lepepe, when we were punching out some of these looking at plus minus stats and stuff, he's at the top of the list there as well. And he's a guy that we were sort of has been almost the thorn in Sydney's side for a while there, of who was going to start between him and Cam Oliver. But defensively, he was doing his job. And I think that's where us as just sort of outskirt media outside of the Sydney Kings, we don't get that information. I think that's maybe why Cam was getting benched a little bit, was because he was struggling a little bit more with defending. But I think even though he might have been struggling, they're still doing their job and they're still being one of these top defensive teams in the league. So just as much as it's really important to have the depth in scoring, it's maybe sort of how many points you're conceding and how many minutes these bench players are playing. So you're still giving your starters a chance to win games.
Yeah, I think you're bang on, but I still get worried with Sydney from a scoring perspective. And that's why I more brought up Sydney as a whole team, because if you're having Jalen Adams coming off the bench, you're starting an Isaiah Leartha. And that's where I have the question. Like, it's not night and day. Like, this is night and day is what I mean. Like, it's completely different players. So I agree with you on the defensive part, but where I'm more going down is the fact that if a Nathan Sobey doesn't have a good scoring game in a playoff game where they try to shut him down, what player can step up in his absence, essentially? You know, if a Bryce Cotton goes down and gets taken out of the game, like we've seen over the past couple of weeks, who can help him on the scoring coming through? You know, this is where the most important thing is for me, because whilst defense is really, really important, and we can go into all those statistics as well, and it obviously would shape a few of my perspectives on some of these teams, I'm more looking at the fact of when we know when playoff time comes around, the key focus is the star players. It's how do we shut down the number one player on the opposition team and make it all about the others. And if you've got no others, you're basically cooked. Now, we'll move into the basically cooked right now, and that's the Adelaide 36ers. So, like, this team is cooked, essentially. Let's just say, for whatever reason, one of Dejan Vasiljevic, Kendrick Davis, Montrezl Harrell, Isaac Humphries go down with injury. This team is destination fucked. Massive shout out to Aussie Man Reviews. All right, they are destination cooked, right? Because they're averaging a league low 17.7 points per game coming off the bench. Now, this has been a question all year. I was very hot on them at the start of the year. I still am somewhat hot. I think this team could make some massive noise in a playoff series. I think they're very, very hard to beat in Adelaide at the Entertainment Centre, but their depth is a bit of a question. Okay, we go down to Lat Mayen, you go down to Sunday Dech, you got Jason Kadee, Nick Marshall. These guys are solid players. Jarrell Martin coming off the bench as well, but they're not getting the production. I don't think also they're all not getting the minutes as well. We saw in plenty of these games, Harrell 38 minutes, Davis 39 minutes, you know, Isaac Humphries 35 minutes, Dejan Vasiljevic 37 minutes. There's no trust. So when you don't feel like you're trusted, why the heck would you play like you're trusted? You know, like you've got to have that two-way respect where you're like, oh, you know, if I go on the court and I make a few mistakes, that's fine. My coach will live with it. But these players seem they go out there and they're scared to shoot the basketball. It's all about Davis. It's all about Harrell. Now, one thing I want to make a massive question with, and I wanted to make it at the start of the show, but I completely forgot about it when I had it written down here in my run sheet. And it's about the Adelaide 36ers in this particular standpoint. Now, the one query I've got on the 36ers is Montrezl Harrell and his ability or lack thereof to keep his head cool. Okay? 3 minutes into that game against the New Zealand Breakers, him and Jonah Bolden were throwing each other around on the court. He is lucky he didn't get a tech foul in that particular game. And I am being dead serious when I say this. When playoff time comes around, we know how physical the game does change. The umpires let the whistle go. They let these games go a little bit longer than they do during the regular season. I know they don't say that, but they 100% do. There is a blueprint right now to knock off the LA 36ers. And it's get under Montrezl Harrell's skin, pull the dreadlocks like Zach Merritt did years ago of Nick Natanui, and just absolutely send him into another universe. And that'll be the way, because then once you bring in on Jarrell Martin, there's not much after that as well. But I just think it was an interesting one to sort of look at this point of the season, because a lot of these teams that are contending, you see the sort of direct comparison and that parallel sort of feeling between, you know, them having success as a team and then their bench unit having success as well. And it's going to be a really, really important thing, obviously, as we go along. And like I mentioned, the main point of my perspective, or it might be slightly different to yourself, Jez, is the fact of my perspective when I come from this is if my star player goes down, who the heck is going to be able to score that 30 points in that particular game? So that's where I come from. But you got a couple more comments before we finish off, Jez?
Yeah, like I've got no pushback on this. This is why I think Adelaide, I said it earlier in the show, that they're done. I think they might make the they might make the semifinals because the teams behind them are sinking. But I think that, like you said, they can mix things up in this whole play-in process, and they might make it. But you get them into a 3-game series, a 5-game series, and they're going to really, really struggle because they're already playing their guys. Like you mentioned, their 3-star players, Vasiljevic, Harrell, and Davis, are all playing 35-plus minutes, and they're already playing an 8-man game because there's only 3 guys that are playing off their bench, and that's Kadee, Dench, and Jarrell Martin. And those guys, when the games have been tight, these guys are only playing sort of 10 to 15 minutes. So they're absolutely struggling. There is no confidence in them. I think you can see Jarrell Martin, when he gets hot, he's staying on, but he's not getting hot very often. So these guys are like absolutely in the grind already, and they have been for the last sort of 5 games. So you move through a whole play-in process where you're playing sort of every second, third day, and then you move into a final series where you're playing every second day, and these guys have got to play these big minutes. They're in absolute trouble, I think, Adelaide, unfortunately. Like, great starting 5, but depth was always going to be their problem from the start of the season, and it's going to prove itself eventually. It's going to come back and haunt them.
Excellent points from both the boys. Our basketball fix brains trust, but we want to hear from you. Get onto our socials, leave a comment, let us know what you think about how the bench can shape championship chances. And Monster, if you are listening to this, and we do hope you tune in, and you'd like to have a little quiet word with Josh, care of the basketball fix, might take a little flight over to Perth, but I'm sure he'll be happy to meet with you, boys.
I'd love to see it.
That's it all. I put 20 on it. Boys, it's been a fantastic episode. Maybe gone a little bit longer than usual, but you get that when you put me on a show. You know, it just happens. You have to embrace the awesomeness that is. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for bringing us our basketball fix for another week. I'm going to throw over to Josh to give a bit of a rundown of our socials and all the goings on at the basketball fix headquarters.
Yeah, well, I'll quickly just start off by saying, mate, we haven't got the nagging mum in the quarter, essentially, with Ryan telling me and Jez, all right, shut up, move on, come on, let's go, had enough of your shit, let's move on. So it was refreshing to be able to talk a little bit of shit, wasn't it, Jez? But great job, Berto. Obviously, it's been great having you on over the past couple of weeks, and Ryan is obviously missed as well. But I just want to give a quick shout out to a few things. So plenty going on behind the scenes as well. Now, we're 10 Instagram followers away from hitting that 1,000 follower mark as well. Now, with that will be coming a little giveaway from the Sporting Globe. We'll be giving away 2 $100 gift vouchers to 2 of our lucky and loyal fans as well. So what you need to do right now is head over to the Basketball Fix website, to the Basketball Fix Instagram, I should say, at the Basketball Fix podcast. Make sure you give us a follow over there and get involved. Comment, like the post, and get involved as well. Wait for that little individual post from the Sporting Globe. So once you get on there, all you're going to have to do is like, comment, and be following both the Basketball Fix and the Sporting Globe. And the winner will be announced in just over a month's time as well. I'll be looking into sort of that March period there as well, when the NBL finals action is really, really heating up. But obviously as well, like you said, the socials, the website, everything going on as well, www.thebasketballfix.com. Check out our Instagram, check out our Twitter. Make sure, again, like I mentioned earlier, you check out all these incredible individual team podcasts. There is still some incredible things to come. We're still looking for hosts for the Adelaide 36ers podcast, the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, the Melbourne United, and the Cairns Taipans podcast as well. If you think you're the right fit, make sure you head over to our Instagrams and don't hesitate to reach out. But Berto, mate, it's been an incredible episode, and I'll let you do the honours, mate. I'm not sure if you're going to nail it. If you don't, Jez and I will take over, and we'll go from there.
That's all good. Hopefully you've enjoyed the episode, everyone. Do make sure you head over to our socials, over to our website, thebasketballfix.com, and hopefully you've had your basketball fix.
Nailed it, son.
Turnover at halfway. Clock at 10. Adams the off balance. Oh!